Recently, I was watching a documentary. It talked about a woman who went to sleep and then she woke up with a different accent. In fact, there have been many cases where people's accents just change overnight. Sometimes it is a result of trauma. There's a case where a man hit his head in a swimming pool and he suddenly became a pianist. So many cases like that. Anyway, waking up and having a different foreign accent to a country you've never been before, that's quite an amazing story, isn't it? And they even have a name for it, foreign accent syndrome. What if I were to tell you this was her past life impression? If we have experienced good or bad, trauma or happiness in our previous life, it will make an impression, and that will give rise to karma in this life. It might determine the choices that we make in this life. A person may be scared to go in a swimming pool because they don't like to swim. A person may be scared to drive a car even in their 30s and they've never learned to drive. They'll make choices in their life based on these impressions from previous life. The likes and dislikes are coming from previous life. Even within our childhood, let's say you went to the zoo and you were 5 years old and you had a bad day at the zoo. You might not like zoos for the rest of your life because that made an impression. These impressions are called samskAras.
It's the cycle of birth and rebirth and death and all that, right?
It is. Today we'll mostly talk about samskAras from the previous life, but samskAras are subliminal impressions on our mind coming from previous life and even from within this life. And even more than one life, because the circle of life and death has been going on for a long time. We have with us Pandit Atul Krishna Das. Panditji, can you please tell us what is the meaning of past life samskaras?
So you can think of samskars as impressions that are engraved into our psyche. So think of something like, let's say that I have a metal spoon, right? And I want to write my name on it. What's going to happen to that? As soon as I wash it, the name gets washed off. But let's say I have an engraver and I engrave it. It's like burned in or it's etched into the metal. That's not coming off. You could wash it many, many times and it's not coming off. So samskars are impressions, literally. They are impressed into our consciousness. And they don't wash off. They don't just come off easily. And we come back to that again and again naturally.
So you're saying that they are literally imprinted in our mind?
That's correct. Yes, they become imprinted and we stick with that. We will go back to it. We might learn other new behaviors, but we will go back to our samskars.
Can you give an example of a past life samskar?
Well, for example, if someone in a previous life had learned a particular language or they had learned to write poetry, that's something that might stay with them. And they may come into this life and without having learned that, they suddenly sit up one day and sometimes it's related to a trigger event like a, head trauma or something. And suddenly they are able to speak a language that they didn't know before, or suddenly they're able to write poetry or play the piano or something like that.
It takes 12 to 15 years to become an expert in Sanskrit, and you learned it in 1 year. You were a young American teenager in the 1970s, and Sanskrit, the ancient language of India, which you had never even heard before, came easy to you. Can you tell me the story of how you heard Sanskrit for the first time and how old you were?
Well, I was 15 years old, and I heard a discourse on Bhagavad Gita, and I heard a verse. It was Nirmana Moha Jita Sangadosha. And I could follow it. I could memorize it. I didn't know what it meant. I did have to learn Sanskrit later. I spent maybe about 18 months doing kind of intensive daily study, self-study. And over time, there were things that, started coming more to the forefront in terms of my ability to understand and to express myself in Sanskrit.
So when
Sanskrit came very naturally.
So would you agree this was a past life samskara, and in your previous life you spoke Sanskrit?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt of it. It is something from a previous life. I did have to put some effort into picking it up again, but the fact that it came as easily as it did, and the fact that I had a natural affinity for it.
Yes.
These were both indications that there was a samskar from a previous life.
You also had a samskar for medicine and science. These things came very naturally to you: mathematics, physics, engineering.
That's correct, yes. And, if someone has done something in a previous life, then we may have an inclination for it. I always had an interest in medicine. I had an interest in math and physics, as you say. If someone has an inclination for things that are complex, it's a thing that we naturally latch on to.
So you're saying you didn't have to have a trauma to learn Sanskrit. You just had to put a little bit of effort in it, and you were able to learn Sanskrit similarly with a little bit of effort, and not even going to college for science or engineering. You were able to pick it up very, very easily, and this was a past life sanskara. For myself, the past life sanskara was Ayurveda. From the day I would read about it, I just felt like I've done it before, and I knew it. So going back to, you don't have to have a very traumatic event to unlock the past life samskaras, but there are some things that come easily to some people, especially children. You can see they have affinities for different things. This is why when children have a natural talent for something, it should be encouraged from a very young age. Kids start learning violin at the age of 3, 4 in Japan. That's the Suzuki method, or even piano. And in Asian countries, they do start the kids with whatever talents they have pretty early. We had a kid like that who started playing violin very early and taught themselves piano and was playing the piano at a very early age as well. Is it coming from their past life?
I believe so. Absolutely. 100%. There's no doubt that, as I said, we have a natural affinity for something, and we may also have an aversion or a fear related to other things. These are all coming from past lives. When we find ourselves drawn to something, it is almost always because there is some samskar from a previous life. Or if we find ourselves with an irrational fear or hatred of something, that also is very likely coming from a previous life.
I want to give my example. I have had recurrent dreams of falling in water. Of course, I think it's a past life samskara. And the dream, there's an ocean and I fall into the ocean. So I was always pretty scared of water. I still am to a certain extent. I didn't even get to see the ocean till I was a teenager. So falling in an ocean since I was a kid, even though I'd never seen one. So that's definitely, and it actually shows up in my horoscope, and Jyotishi, an astrologer, told me not to go in water till I was 15 years old because there was some yoga there. So would you have any fears that you think come from previous life?
Absolutely. I think we all do. We have fears that are irrational, fear of mental institution also.
Right. And then some people have fear of driving a car. Do you think that would be, and there is no rhyme or reason, they've never driven in their life. Do you think that would be a past life samskar?
Absolutely, yes. If someone died in a previous life in a car accident, in a traumatic car accident, that would create a very strong impression. The impressions with which we leave our body are very, very strong. This is also why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, at the time of leaving the body, if one remembers me, they will come to me. Because the thing that we're able to fix our mind on is not easy. And at the time of death, when we feel that we are being torn, and I say we, meaning the Atma, the self, is being ripped out of the body, What is the thing you are going to take with you? It's kind of like you're on an airplane. You know how they say, if in the event that we crash, here's the brace position. And then you need to know where the exits are because it might be dark and smoky and you need to get out of the plane. Don't take anything with you. Don't stop to try to get your wallet and your purse and your mobile phone. Just get off the plane. And that's kind of what the experience of death is. The only thing you're going to take with you are the things that you've done, the results of your action.
And the impressions.
And those impressions, those are part of our consciousness.
So we can say that a lot of phobias that we have in this life may be related to, well, obviously some of them be related to our childhood, but they can also be related to our previous life. Thank you very much, Pandit Atul.